Welcome back to the Intersections podcast. In this episode, I sit down with an old high school friend of mine named Daren Hall. Daren has quite the testimony. He is now the owner of a very successful carpentry and construction company, but before that, Daren battled substance use disorder. At one time, he did not know how to function without alcohol or hard drugs. Substance use led him to one of the lowest points in his life, when he found himself behind bars and responsible for another man's death. Daren found hope and healing through the 12-step program used in Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, and other similar programs of recovery and transformation. The 12 steps are more than just a recovery program. They are spiritual practices. The steps emphasize faith in God, taking personal responsibility, seeking forgiveness, making amends, and ensuring that others hear the good news that freedom from substances is possible. Today, Daren is an active leader in the recovery community. He has earned the respect of his friends and associates. His mission in life is to help others. In fact, we had to postpone the recording of this episode because he had to help someone who he had just met find and get into detox before they changed their mind. In this conversation, Daren shares his personal testimony and offers his insights to recovery and the 12-step program. If you or your family has been affected by substance use disorder, I think you will find our conversation to be an offering of hope. Before we begin, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Then, share this video with anyone and everyone that you think it might help. Enjoy. So back to what we was talking about. So, people pleasing. When did you realize that was a problem for you?
Well, I had heard the term codependency, I believe it was like at a church I had attended. They were talking about codependency. It was sort of like a rehab type program.
Uh-huh.
And I always thought codependency meant that I relied on someone else. That was my thought process of codependency. But when they explained it to me, that it's not necessarily you relying on someone, but the fact that you're people pleasing, and like having trouble saying no to people and putting
Mm,
yourself out there to where you're like stretched thin, and you really want to say no but you don't because you're worried about that person's thoughts or actions, I
I
guess. and
see.
uh and uh and I still have trouble with that.
Wow, that's actually really good. I guess even I've never thought about codependency like that. So thinking of it as like the need to be needed, I guess, or like to have other people depend on you.
Exactly.
Mm,
Exactly.
yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I'm a people pleaser, and I definitely have to watch myself around codependency um, in that regard because I guess I've never really thought about that, but that's really good. And that is why, like I was saying earlier, that's why I put a lot of irons in the fire. I think because you know I used to especially not say no to people. I'd be like, yeah, let me help, let me jump in, let me do whatever. But
That's right. That's right. I'm the exact same way, Daniel. I actually a while back I was kind of on the whole I want to help everybody type deal, and it's good to help people, don't get me wrong, but there's that line that sometimes God, we're trying to play God instead of letting God be God. You know what I
mm,
mean? Like
yeah,
some people, if you go help a homeless man, I mean, that's great to a certain degree, but you can also help that man and almost essentially love him to death if you're not
mm,
careful, you
yeah,
know. So,
yeah. That's a very good observation. I was just thinking, I was talking to an older lady this week, and her daughter died of a drug overdose. And in our conversation, it came up that she felt, you used the term loved her to death. She felt like, looking back, she loved her daughter so much she didn't say some of the hard things that she wished she would have said. So she has, and it may not have changed anything, you know, but
Right.
in her experience, she sort of has these regrets about that. And that's tough. But yeah, you do have to know how to help people. And when you have a helper spirit, you do have to have a lot of wisdom and set those boundaries, like you said, because it can also drain you, and you're no good to anyone else if you're empty. You know what I'm saying?
No, I do. I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, and especially
Exactly.
in business, because you're a businessman, and so then there's that dynamic too, right? Like, you can't just do everything for free either. You know, like you,
Right.
you have to make a living, right? And I know a lot of entrepreneurs who are spiritual people as well, and that's always a delicate balance to walk. Um, you know, but your business is doing well, right? You're still doing good.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It it never. It just, man, it amazes me every day. I wake up and and I have a lot of physical things that I've never had before. Like, when
Mm-hmm.
back when you used to know me when I lived in Troy, I literally walked up and down the street. That was my life. I didn't have a car, didn't have a place to live, and I wake up and I have two vehicles sitting in the driveway that are nice. That one of them's paid for, and having the ability to be able to do things at a whim. But I've never had anything like that, and
Yeah,
like this whole journey has been it's been unreal to me, man. And I I don't even know how to describe it, Daniel. Like
yeah,
I feel like a blessing every day, man,
mm,
and I'm able to use that too.
yeah,
That to be able to help others, like like we were just talking about, man. People, especially like people that knew where I came from, to see where I'm at today, man. Like I know that that's a testimony in
for
itself,
sure. Yeah,
and I'm nothing special, man. Like,
right. Right, I get you, but you know what? You don't have to make that disclaimer. You really don't.
right,
I mean, I feel like you and I both, we feel like we need to make that disclaimer, but that's something I've been learning in life too. Is like, I don't need to make that disclaimer. You know, I work for what I have. Number one, and number two, God's blessing and God's favor is a mystery. You know, and there are things I'm not blessed in, and there are things that I have been blessed in, and I think we should just be grateful for that. You know, we don't need to give any disclaimers like, we're nothing special, but we are something special too. Like, we're God's children and God loves us, and we have skills, and we use those skills, and we get monetary blessings in return for it, right? I mean, that's
right, right. I mean, there's days I've woke up and kind of felt, I don't know how the word for it, but guilty for being successful in times. I mean,
yep,
like, which is insane. Like, I'm grateful, but at times I feel like I'm led to feel guilty about being successful in life, and I don't. It's such a weird thing,
it
man.
is. Where
It
does that
really
come
is.
from? I wrestle with that too. Where does that come from? I mean, I'm not sure exactly.
No, no clue. But I don't know. I
I
can't
got you.
really. I can't
Dude,
explain
I
it,
feel you
man.
100%. I've actually talked to people about this before too. Like, even taking a vacation or going somewhere that other people couldn't go. Sometimes you get this sense of guilt about it, and it may just be where we were raised from, where we were raised at too. Like, that environment is a very specific kind of like rural, lower middle class. And I'm not talking like societal, but financially lower class, lower middle class. Um, I don't know. You would hear things growing up like "must be nice," if somebody it got like a vacation. Well, must be nice,
Yeah, yeah,
or I wonder how they did that. It's like, and I guess that sort of culture,
yeah,
at least for me, probably plays a
yeah.
role.
They must have been raised with a silver spoon in their mouth,
That's
or
it.
like, yeah, yeah, man. Like,
Can't hide money.
yes, sir, yes, sir. I have heard that several times, man. And
Yeah, yeah,
but I try to stay humble, man,
sure.
and and just like, the county I live in made me the treatment center coordinator, for which I am no longer, by the way, but, it was during COVID time, so it
Oh,
was
wow.
really difficult.
I bet.
But,
Yeah.
like going up into the rehab with my hat on backwards, pulling up in the Hummer, with the music bumping and, and getting out, and the guys are like, oh God, who is this?
Right.
He's coming to join us, not knowing that I was the new coordinator.
Yeah.
It was important for me to be able to connect with them guys to say, hey, look, I'm not better than you. I am you.
That's good. Yeah.
Because that's the only way that you can reach someone else, man. Like, no,
Yeah. You're right.
nobody else could reach me, man, unless I knew they had been in the trenches before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Them were the people that could help me, man. And
Right.
it's important for me to stay humble.
Well, and you said something very important about humility there and being humble, um, because this comes back to what we were talking about earlier, balance, right? Like you have to have a healthy balance between humility and pride, because there is good pride. Like you should take pride in things like your work, for instance. I know you take a lot of pride in your work. I mean, you can just see that when you finish something, you post it, you brag on it, and that's not just marketing. Like I know you, because I know that's an expression of pride, right? And you should have that. But at the same time, you have to have humility. And you said something like a while ago. I think that's important about humility. It's just humility is knowing who you are. Like I think that just coming into any environment and being like knowing your darkest side, which you obviously someone who's been through recovery, you have to face that. Everyone does. I mean, that's part of life. It's part of growing up, is realizing you have a shadow side, you have a dark side.
Mm.
You're really no different than any other person that somebody calls a monster or whatever else. Like it could
Yes.
literally be you. And
Yes.
and some of us have gotten closer to that than others. But and then the other thing I think is important, what you said, and it sounds kind of surface, but like showing up with your hat on backwards and just showing up in a certain way, and um, you know, just to think about church for a minute. Some churches even today still have like very strict dress codes or expect a certain people to show up a certain way or whatever. And in Scripture, the only dress code that's ever given is that people are supposed to dress with humility. Like that's literally the only thing, is like don't show up. It's in, Paul writes about it, James writes about it. Like the only dress code of the early church was don't show up with all your jewelry on so that you can show how rich you are to everybody else. And that's not to say anything about jewelry. It's just to say, and it's because it's different for everyone, but show up in a way that expresses your sense of humility. And you did that, when you show up. And how did people respond to you? Did people think, like, did it take them a minute to get used to you being the director?
Yeah, it was funny because, me being my first time at that treatment facility, the person that I had took their place or stepped into their shoes, which were huge, huge shoes to fill. I mean, it was a little old lady who, she, man, I have learned so much from this lady, but she was also a very honest person and very direct, and I
Mm-hmm.
was on the opposite side of that. But I think, like, I feel like they received me well, and the reason I say that is because I heard a lot of honesty in there. Like, I think one of the first few meetings I had in there, Daniel, like this guy, he's gone now, but he had actually overdosed later on. But he had said during the meeting that he loved crack cocaine better than his son, more than his
Mm-hmm.
son, and now I don't take that as, hearing that. I don't think that was like true. You know what I mean? But I
Got
think
it.
what he was getting at, like, I felt that. Like, you know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Like the
Yeah.
fact that he even made that statement, of course he loves his son more than that, or he wouldn't
Right.
been there.
Right.
But, like things like that, man, the things that I heard, and I could relate to it. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like, most people that hear something like that, they're like, oh man, they're crazy. They're awful
Right.
people. But, I, it rang a little different for me. But,
Yeah.
I met some wonderful people in there, man. And a lot of them people, I thought, at first I was going to go in there and I'm going to help these people.
Yeah.
No, No, I went in there and those people helped me.
Yeah.
Like truthfully, I mean
Yeah.
that's how it works.
That's how you know you're in the sweet spot for sure. That's how you know, and that's the same with me on the chaplaincy side of things. I've shared this before. It's like I do know that I help people, but at the same time, I always feel like I leave work I learn so much more than I feel like I contribute. And it's weird to get paid for that because I'm like I get paid to do this, it's really cool. We're going to use some of this. We haven't officially started, but some of this is really good. So I'm gonna use some of this, but I'll introduce you formally in just a moment, and we'll talk about your story. But what are you doing now? You said you had a meeting tonight, so you're not the director, but what are you up to now? Are you still part of meetings, I guess? And
Yeah. I mean, I still, we actually started a Saturday night group. Now it's not like an official meeting. We call it the Crosstalk Cafe because I
okay,
thought it was important for people to be able, people in recovery, not so much alcoholic or drug addict, people who want to get better off of some type of mind altering substance or whatever it may be, to be able to come and just relax and
mm,
talk, about, the situations. And, a lot of formatted meetings are great. That's what helped me. But I felt like we needed a meeting that we could let our hair down and just,
mm,
and just be open and talk without a bunch of rules and things like that put in place to where no
yeah,
cross talking. I mean, now it has to be done if there's a fine line. Okay. I have found that there is a balance. Okay.
yeah,
You know, crosstalk's good, but you gotta find that balance to keep from offending people and
right,
just, we're there to love one another and support one another, and that's
yeah.
what the meeting was meant to be for. But
That's
but
awesome.
I'm still big into the meetings, man.
Yeah,
I get in
yeah.
where I fit in.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. I love it. So I'm going to introduce you now, just so that everyone who's listening at home will know who you are. So I'm here today with Daren Hall. Daren Hall is a master carpenter and owner of Carpenter of Mars. I've seen his work, so I'm going to use that term. He's the owner of Carpenter of Mars, and you're based out of Clayton, North Carolina. So Carpenter of Mars, based out of Clayton, North Carolina. Besides that, though, Daren and I are childhood friends. We met in middle school in the band, I believe, was our first time we ever met. And went to high school together for a little while, ran in the same group of friends, got in the same kind of trouble for a few years, and have stayed in touch over the years. And so, Daren, I told you this before, but just for our listeners, Daren is one of the reasons I actually created this podcast, the Intersections podcast. I wrote down some things I wanted to do and who I wanted to talk to, and I was writing down my target audience. And there were several names that got written down, and you were one of those names because, my ministry, when I first started pastoring, I was in the mountains of North Carolina, and it was just, small town, rural, hardworking people, what I call everyday people. And I loved pastoring that church. And so I wanted to create a podcast that brought some of my theological and spiritual ideas into conversation with just everyday people. That's something that you wouldn't need a college seminary degree to talk about spirituality and theology. And I've always found you to be a spiritual person and deeply spiritual, deeply spiritual. And so that's why I invited you to come on and just to have a chat with us about your story. So thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here, man. You're like a hero of mine, Daniel. Like,
Oh,
I mean, really, like, just from the beginning and listening to your podcast. And, man, I get so much understanding listening to you. I mean, like some of the conversations that you have are so deep. I mean, I really, it's like I'll turn it on in the truck going down the road, and like it helps me understand a lot of stuff too, man. I love listening to you. I think you're really interesting. You're smart, man.
I
And
appreciate that, Daren. I really do. That's very kind of you. It really is. I also want to say too, for those who are listening on the audio, there are several different Southern accents in the South, but there are two primary ones here in North Carolina. One of them is mountain country, and the other one's Piedmont country. Daren, you embody Piedmont country, and so I think our listeners are going to love that, because I used to get a hard time when I went to like out west and stuff, and I would present papers, and I would have, because with my southern accent, and they would just think I was stupid or something, you know. But then when I presented, they were like, "Oh my God, where are you from?" Yeah,
he's intelligent,
right? Like, because there's so many stereotypes out there. And I wasn't picking on you by any means. I love
no,
it.
no,
I love it, man. Yeah.
I hear it all the time. I ordered food the other day, and I didn't even give the people my name. And when I got there, they're like, "We knew it was you just by the sound of your voice." And I was like,
That's
"Oh,
awesome. That's awesome.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, good deal. Well, listen, we're here today. I've asked Daren to come on to show and talk about his recovery from substance use disorder. Now, I use that term, substance use disorder. I'm a chaplain. That's the term we use in a healthcare setting. That's the verbiage that we use. But we might use words like addiction. We might use substance abuse interchangeably in this episode. I just want to say up front, I'm not using any of those terms pejoratively or negatively. We're just having a chat. And so don't think that if I use those words that I'm speaking negatively. I have done that in the past, and I'm guilty of it, and I've had to ask forgiveness for that, where I've, used the word addict sort of in a derogatory term. Or a derogatory way, but we're not doing that today, even though we may use those words interchangeably.
Now I did hear the word purgatory. What did you
Oh,
say?
pejorative,
Yeah.
pejoratively. That means
Okay.
using something in a way that has a negative connotation.
Oh, okay, okay. You could have
So,
just
like,
said that.
yeah, but that was more syllables.
Right, right.
I ended
Yeah,
up still saying it anyway, though, right?
yeah, yeah. Keep it humble.
All right. That's right. That's exactly right. Yes, sir. Yeah. So if our words aren't perfect, as they just weren't, just forgive us. But we're trying our best here. So Daren, I just want you to tell your story. You can start and finish wherever you want. But just I've heard a little bit of it. Well, actually, I've heard you sent me a video of you sharing your whole story that you shared with Alcoholics Anonymous. But I just want to ask you, if you will, just to share your story with us.
Sure, sure. I always start out in the meetings telling people I was born when I was little. you know, just kind of whatever. But
Yeah.
sorry. No, like you said, we come from a really small town. Everybody kind of knows everybody around there. uh, going through school, I never quite felt like I fit in with anybody. But at the same time, I was kind of like a chameleon, where wherever I was at, I could make myself fit in, I guess you could say. Like, I was good at hiding, in plain sight around people. Um, anyway, there was a big racial issue at the school at the time I was going to. Of course, I was never, my family, you've met my family, Daniel. There's not a racist bone in their body, but the school at the time that we were at had some issues going on, and
Yeah.
I had got in.
Can I jump in
Yeah,
right here? I want to put this in context for everybody, because I was thinking about this. You were sharing this the other day when we talked before. This is during the time of like the Rodney King beating
yeah,
had just happened. The O.J. Simpson trial was literally going on in that time period, because we were in high school when that verdict came out. I remember the day it came out in school. We were in school when it happened. So there was a lot of racial tensions that were running high. And it's kind of funny, because I think every generation sort of has those epoch moments, like it was Trayvon Martin, it was George Floyd in like our adult lives. But before that, there was the O.J. Simpson trial that was came right after the Rodney King beating. There was a lot of suspicion. So don't mean to interrupt you, just to add some historical
no, no, no,
context of where that's at. But yeah, so you were going to school. There was a lot of things going on there racially.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Anyway, on a school bus, I was more or less standing up for my girlfriend. She had got hit by something, and I was terrified, but I stood up and I got beat down pretty bad at the time. And kind of fast forward from that, because that's really that. Listen, that part's not the important part. Like, the important part is how the media had kind of took control of this thing and ran with it. and being in a small town and being that poor kid that got beat up on the bus everywhere I turned. Um, Man, I really had an issue with how people viewed me at that point. Like before, I was just trying to fit in, and now I'm at a spot where I feel like I'm standing out from everybody. I'm not like them. I mean, I had that whole thing kind of going through me, but
Yeah. Can I ask you
uh,
there? Can I ask you there? What happened to you wasn't necessarily a racial thing, but it kind of
right.
became that, as I
Yes,
understand it, right?
yeah,
And,
absolutely.
yeah, and that was like the last thing you wanted because, like you said, you're not racist. Your family wasn't like it. It wasn't about that. Your girlfriend got hit with something. They were on the bus throwing stuff,
That's
and she got
right.
hit with something. And you're just standing up for your girl as a teenager, right? Like you're doing what you think you're supposed to do. Um, so yeah, I just want to make that clear. Like this
Yeah.
wasn't.
No, no,
It
like
just
the
kind of became
media.
that for you.
Yeah, the media kind of projected it. The poor little white kid on the bus.
Hmm.
But anyway, it made me feel even more different than I already was, and that was when I kind of got my first taste of alcohol. I do remember the first time I actually felt the presence of alcohol. I the feeling that I didn't care what anybody thought of me. Well, man, that was all it took for me to be off to the races. Like, when I could use that substance, and from then on out, I didn't care what you thought of me. Like, like I could walk up to the prettiest girl and ask her to dance or whatnot. Like it almost gave me a sense of bravery in a sense, if that makes any sense at all. But the main feeling I got was, essentially I just didn't care anymore what people thought about me, and that was a big thing for me because I was always stuck in that. Uh, but moving forward, I had tried other substances. The substance really isn't important. We call it MAC, mind altering chemicals. Okay, because that's what I was doing. I was altering how I felt. Because I was never happy with how I felt just being me. So I started a small construction company back then. I was doing work on chicken houses and things like that. And this other chemical that I was taking, I had become very dependent upon it to the point to where that if I couldn't get it, I couldn't show up for work because I would be sick all night and all day. Well, I ended up losing my business, and a friend had suggested that I start driving a tractor trailer because, I didn't have anybody watching over my back, and I could just be my own boss essentially, just driving down the road, and it seemed easy enough. Uh, I done that for about 5 years, and I had my fiance at the time had split up with me on January 1st of 2013. And because, I was in my feelings, I thought it'd be a good idea to fix that. So I went into the local truck stop and I got a bunch of alcohol and decided to consume it. And back then, the way it was, if I shut my eyes for a moment and went to sleep and woke up an hour later, I assumed that I was fit to drive. I was already going through some emotional, turmoil. Uh, I got behind the wheel of a tractor trailer and roughly an hour from my house, midway. Wouldn't you say it's about an hour,
Mm-hmm.
Daniel?
Yep.
I ran through a red light and I struck a driver in the driver door, and he lost his life. Uh, Now, I was terrified. Uh, I felt shame. I felt guilt. I felt all these emotions attacking me at once. Like, you know, I hated what I had done and who I was after that. And in order to fix that emotional pain, I ended up kind of drowning myself in more substances, hoping that that would eventually, be the end of me. In a sense, like I wanted to kill myself, Daniel, but I was hoping that maybe if it happened that way, maybe God would be like, oh, well, he didn't mean to do it. But I mean, I had all intentions on, just ending my life from using. I mean, basically, and I lost everything. I lost my house, driver's license, uh, my daughter. You know, that was a big one.
Mm-hmm.
To the point to where I had got, I had finally gotten locked up, and I got to tell you, you would think being handcuffed into the back of a police car, looking at serious time, would have scared me to death. And the only thing I can really tell you is I felt relieved. I felt relieved because I knew that I was no longer in control of the show anymore. You know, and that is the compressed version of the story. From jail, after spending quite a bit of time in there, it was almost a year. I was locked in, in county jail. Had this lady come to me and ask me if I wanted help, if I would like to try a new way of life, you know. And I'll be honest with you, all I wanted was to get out of jail at that point. I'd been there long enough. I just wanted to get out of jail. The fact that I thought, could I live a different life? I didn't think that was possible. I wanted to, but was it possible? Maybe for you, but not for me. I'm not capable. Why would I want to live a life like that?
Mm.
Square. That's what why would I want to be a square? I don't think I can live life that way. I'll be bored my entire life, you know. And that's when I got introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous, NA, the 12-step program that saved my life, you know.
Yeah. And this older lady, was she the one who got you into Alcoholics Anonymous?
She was the one that stood up in front of the judge, and basically she was the liaison. That's a word I didn't know. I found out though. But she was a liaison between the treatment center and the court, and man, she believed in me. She didn't even know me, Daniel, but she believed in me, and man, that was something for me, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, I went into that treatment facility. It's really funny, man. Like, cause my chest was all puffed up, like from where I'd been doing push-ups, cause I knew I was going to prison, and my ego was,
Yeah.
hey, did you see me on the front page of the paper? You know what I mean. And
Yeah.
the counselor had set me down up front in front of everybody, cause I guess he seen my ego, and he asked me if I was willing to do whatever it took to stay clean and sober, and I said, yeah. And he said, and he threw a highlighter across the room onto the floor, and he said, are you willing to get down on your hands and knees and push that highlighter across the floor with your nose to stay clean and sober? And man, I was like, I guess. And I started to go down, and he said, wait a minute. I didn't tell you to do it. I
Oh.
asked you if you were willing to do it. And that was my introduction to the steps right
Okay.
there.
Okay.
Willingness.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you feel at that moment? What was going through your head then?
Uh, at that moment,
Yeah.
just, like, man, maybe, I guess the word would be humility a little bit, man. Like I
Okay.
was, I was like, man, in front of all these people, and here it is, they're kind of laughing at me too.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, to be 100% honest, and I said today when I did this interview with you that I was going to be honest. At the time, I just wanted to be out of jail. Like I
Mm-hmm.
thought that I would be able to stay and live a clean and sober lifestyle it was still so far out. You
Yeah.
know, like I didn't know how to keep it in today. I was still projecting so far into the future, I guess, that,
Yeah.
and see, was I willing to just stay sober for the day? See, that should have been the real question, and I guess
Mm-hmm.
I was, you know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Do you feel like that was accurate? Like, given your experience of recovery, do you have to be willing to do whatever it takes? Do you have to
I think
eventually get to that point?
I think so, man. I believe so. I heard an old timer in the rooms one day, and we were talking about willingness to do whatever it takes, and and I'll never forget it because, like, I wished I could say it was me because it was so cool. But he said he was driving down the road, and the thought of drinking had crossed his mind, and the only thing that stood between him and a drink was his money. See, because he knew he'd have to go in the store and buy a drink. So he took the money out of his wallet, rolled the window down, and threw it out the window going down the interstate.
Wow. Wow.
He said, and I didn't drink that day. He said,
Wow.
I didn't have the money to.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's
yeah,
doing
I mean,
whatever it takes.
I do believe that, man. I mean, you got to be willing,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't have to project so far. I mean, I try to tell a lot of people early on, don't worry about tomorrow. I used to tell my mama, I'm getting messed up tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm getting messed up.
Mm-hmm.
But today, not today. I ain't doing it today. And she hated me saying that, Daniel. Poor
Uh-huh.
thing. Like I
Sure.
put her through
I
so
can I
much,
can imagine. Yeah.
but it worked for me. I mean, in a weird way, it made me feel better. It was like tomorrow maybe, but not today.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I've heard others say that have been through recovery, like thinking of it one day at a time, and not just in recovery. That is just a very good way to live. It's a very wise way to live.
yes,
I think that's why Jesus said, "Pray, give us this day our daily bread."
mm,
We just need what we have today, and he
that's
says
right.
several times, "Take no thought of tomorrow." Right, so we have to some degree, plan, but we also have to be as present as we can. Even in the story of like Moses and the manna that God sent down, they had one day to eat it or it would go bad. Like everything was day by day. It seems like that's kind of a divine principle. The more you can live day by day, the easier I think things are because you're not living in the future so much.
And that's super hard in recovery. It's just staying present.
Mm.
Not living in the past or projecting into the future. I still have to remind myself daily, with me and my guys before we start work, not every day, but I'd say 98% of the days we start our morning off with prayer. And,
Mm.
and that's one of the prayers I always ask for is God help keep me in today.
Mm.
Just keep me centered in the here and now, and not project. Running a business, man, future tripping. That's a
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
third step, man. I got to be willing to give it to God, man. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. That's very, very true. Yeah. Because and future tripping, but you also mentioned the past, and that's a tough one because there's been times in my life where I've like wished there was a way to erase memories,
Yes,
but you can't. Like it's nearly impossible, to forget some things.
yes,
And in my chaplaincy work, I find that a lot. With seniors, is all this stuff from the past, and sometimes they just can't, like anyone else, can't really escape some of those things in the past. Um,
I think in the program, in the literature, it says we do not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. And for
mm,
now, and I've talked to my sponsor about it, man, like, because I've listened, everything that I've read in the literature to me has been true. But
mm,
that one thing, we do not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. I'm
mm,
not there yet
mm, yeah,
because I have a lot of regrets in my
yeah,
past, and I don't know that that'll ever change. And maybe they
right.
worded it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like,
Yeah,
you know, acceptance is the key. Is
You said it right there. Acceptance and just coming to terms with it. I had someone ask me recently, just talking about religion, and they brought up AA, and this was someone who doesn't believe in God. You know, they would consider themselves an atheist, but really wants to. Like, they really want to. And he told me, he's like, I've tried a lot of times to believe in God, and I can't. But he asked me, we were talking through it, and one of the things that kind of came up was, he was wondering if people like use God as a way to feel good about their past and to not have to take responsibility for it. And he said, you know, even in AA, they say you got to, you know, one of the early steps is putting your trust in a higher power, believing in a higher power. And he just kind of was making the argument, you know, that was the case. But I think it's different. I think true spirituality actually holds you accountable to some of those things that you regret. Like, true spirituality is you taking on the weight of the responsibility. And like, even in a 12-step program, yeah, the faith part comes early on, but it's not far after you're going to get to the steps of making amends, forgiving and asking for forgiveness. I mean, that is the ultimate form of taking responsibility, you know. And there is a lot of religion that does, I feel like, abscond people from responsibility, and we see that a lot. And that's not good spirituality. It's not good faith. But true faith calls you to bear the burden of that, of that kind of responsibility and those kind of regrets. I don't know, but that's just something that came up to me. And I think, like, wouldn't you say that in 12 steps, it was more of like taking responsibility, like facing the darkness of the past?
absolutely. You know, I found a lot in doing like my 4 step. You know, kind of like realizing all that crazy stuff that I've done, and patterns in my life that you man, it's like after putting it on paper and looking at it, I'm like, man, I should have seen that coming. Like,
Uh-huh.
God, look at that! Like, it's right there, it keeps happening. Like, you
Yep.
know,
Yep.
and it's funny because like I having all this knowledge up here about me, man, it was so much different writing it down. You know, I
Mm.
wasn't ever much on writing, but when I was, you know, when I was told to be willing to write and I wrote all this stuff down, man, like making it physical where I can physically look at it, like, you know, I could see all these patterns developing in my life. And at one time, yes, I mean, you're absolutely correct. I did blame God for a lot of the things that went wrong in my life in the beginning.
Mm.
But you know, I did not have a relationship with God either.
Mm.
Now, in my experience now, looking back, now that where I'm at today, man, I can see God was there the whole time. God
Mm.
didn't put me in that situation, but
Mm.
God sure helped me get out of it. You
Yeah.
know, God helped me turn that mess into a
Yes.
blessing. You know,
Yeah.
and uh, I don't know. It was probably before we actually started recording. You were talking about, um, you know, not feeling like you're some kind of, you know, doing a fifth step, right? Like with a sponsor after writing all that stuff down. You were talking about feeling like, you know, that you know you're not a monster because you know you're not so unique, right? Like my sponsor used to tell me I suffered from terminal uniqueness,
Yep.
and that if I didn't get better, I was going to die from it. And
Yeah.
that fifth step, man, it allowed me to be vulnerable. It allowed me to be vulnerable to somebody else,
Yeah.
you know, and to realize that, man, I'm not as damn unique as I think I am.
Yeah. Right.
You know, I
Yeah.
mean, there's a lot of things.
Yeah. I'm going to read the fourth and fifth step for our listeners. So the fourth step is made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. That's where you literally wrote out, what you're talking about, writing it down. And then number 5 is admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. You bring up terminal uniqueness, and that's literally the next thing I wanted to talk about. So let's talk about it. Terminal uniqueness. So this is something I had never heard the term until I was in seminary, and I had a friend whose mother died of alcoholism, physically died from it, and he was her caregiver the last few months of her life, and it really left an impression on him. And I'm sure you're aware of this, but like dying from alcoholism is just like one of the worst ways to go. Like liver shutting down, kidney shutting down, brain shutting down,
Yes.
one kind of after the other. And but anyway, he brought up this term terminal uniqueness in the context of recovery and you know, with her battle of addiction and his own feelings, because this was someone who also suffered with a lot of anxiety and depression and that kind of thing. But you mentioned earlier being younger and just feeling like you didn't fit in, and I was thinking about terminal uniqueness today as we were preparing to record this podcast today, and it occurred to me, and it's probably old, you know, you probably knew this, but it occurred to me that terminal uniqueness causes the drinking and then becomes the biggest obstacle to stopping the drinking. Like, is that kind
I
of the
like
way?
that.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. All right. I know what I'm using tonight.
Okay. Yeah. So it's not like something you develop while you're drinking or using anything. It's almost as if you're trying to treat that by drinking. Like you want to not be so unique, you know, and just, you know, like this idea that you're the most unique person having the most unique experience. No one else is experiencing the world like you. No one else, like other people can do it, but you can't. Like other people can stop, but you can't. Other people can do whatever, be successful, but you can't. Maybe even that's where that comes into play a little bit too. But yeah, it's funny how that drives us to drink and then becomes our biggest
Wow.
obstacle in recovery.
That is. Hey, okay, look, I might have to chair tonight so I can make that a topic.
Okay.
All right, that's good. Wow.
I'm glad I could contribute.
That's good stuff, man. Like, whew, man, it is not your friend. Man,
It is
that is
not. No.
wild.
No. So how do you deal with that? So when you identified that in recovery, what then happened? Like when your sponsor told you that, how did you react to that, or how did he encourage you to sort of react to that?
Well, a lot of times he would say it in a sense, like when I would call him, giving him a poor me, or a lot of times me and him talk. He was a business owner, and now he's like, he's an inspector now for the
Mm-hmm.
town. So, it's kind of wild, but him being a business owner, me calling him, I have a lot of questions to ask him about business and things, or
Mm-hmm.
I'll say, "Oh man, this employee done this today, and can
Mm-hmm.
you believe it? What in the world?" And he's like, "Yeah, Dan, you're probably the only one that's ever had to deal with that kind of stuff before." Like,
Okay, I
and
see.
think,
I see.
but
Yeah.
like the uniqueness and because I can get like to feeling like that everything's overwhelming, and I'm talking about in life today, without a drink or without a drug, like, I still face difficulties. We call it life on life's terms,
Mm.
and man, but I've dealt with some pretty harsh things being
Mm-hmm.
clean and sober. Like, I mean, I lost my dad,
Mm-hmm.
he died, and I was able to do it and get through it, and to know that I'm not unique, that other people before me were able to get through situations like that without using, without drinking, that's comforting to me. Like
Mm-hmm.
as an addict alcoholic, like and I think that's kind of a lot of the things about going to the rooms of AA and or NA or whatever 12-step program you may attend is being there and listening to the honesty in the room to know that you're not alone,
Yeah.
that you're not the only one with these feelings or situations that have arrived.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've heard people that live in houses where like maybe they're forced to live there in a situation where there's drugs or alcohol on a daily basis, but some of those people have still been able to stay clean and sober.
Mm. Wow.
It's like, man, like like it's not impossible. They're not unique. Others have
Right.
done it before.
Yeah. And it's so important that normalization of things. We use that technique sometime in pastoral care settings, especially in grief, because people who experience grief for the first time, they sometimes think they're the only ones who've experienced it this way. They may have an anger issue against the person who died or something and then they feel bad. And so one of the pastoral care things we do is let people know, hey, the way you're feeling right now, anyone who dealt with this might feel the same way, right? Like it's kind of a normalizing of things is important even in the pastoral care side of things. And one time I was asked by a younger minister one time, like, what is the one thing I've learned? Like, what is the most important thing I've learned in ministry? And it didn't take me long to answer. And I'll use the edited version because my mom may listen to this podcast, and I'm very respectful for her. Because I told her I was recording with you earlier. She's like, "Oh, I'm going to listen to that one."
Awesome. Hey, Mom.
Yeah. But I told her, I told this young minister who asked me that, I said, the thing I've learned is that everybody and every family has effed up and is effed up to some degree. Like everybody, you may think that there's these families that have it all together. You may think there's this individual that has it all together. You may think there's this person who's never had any struggles or never. Listen, I'm going to tell you what. It doesn't matter what their background is, what their socioeconomic class is. Everybody has made big mistakes. Everybody has skeletons in their closet, in their family somewhere. Like, that is part of the human experience. And I don't think anyone is exempt from it. And if anyone does say they're exempt from it, I think they're probably lying. We are not as unique in our human experience as we think we are. That's not to take away from everyone's individual experience. Like, you've had your own experiences and they're yours. And everybody has that. But on some degree or another, we are all living this human experience together. Like, uniquely in one way, but not so unique in other ways.
So, question to you, okay?
Okay.
How, especially being like at your age, becoming you were what would you call it, pastor, minister?
Yeah,
Okay.
I pastored. Yeah.
Okay, so in a sense, like, especially being that young, how did you deal with, the fact that didn't people like hold you to this higher standard that maybe you wrestled with yourself? Like, I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, at a young age like that too, like, I believe my ego
Yeah.
would have took hold of that. Like,
Yeah. Well, and it did to some degree at times. I will say this. I think God gave me a special grace when I was younger to do what I did. Looking back now at my age, I probably shouldn't have been doing it as young as I was, to be honest with you, only because I don't think I had the wisdom necessary in some areas. There were some things that were out of my league, and I wasn't honest about those things being out of my league. And so some of those things I do have regrets about. But yeah, I think that higher standard and people kind of expecting you to be an adult at such a young age, and that's kind of part of my personality trait is I think for some reason or another, I felt like I needed to be older than I was before I was. And I see this in other people too. I even see it sometimes in my children, this desire to like want to be, think that you have to be the adult, think that you have to have it all together, but you don't at that age. And so, I guess I would say to that, like a lot of things I just wasn't honest about, like I just hid things, crazy, like little things, like in my denomination, even watching rated R movies was frowned upon. So like if I was in the parsonage watching a rated R movie and somebody dropped by, I'd have to cut it off real quick, make sure it wasn't on the menu and they put the cable box on, things like that. So I think that it probably prompts secrecy, to some degree or another. But yeah,
wow.
looking back, I mean, there are a lot of things I talked about based on what I heard other people say, but I had like grief, for instance, and I hate saying this because I lost other people and I lost friends, but until I lost my father, I didn't really have grief so deep that I didn't know how to deal with it. Like that was the worst. That was the first time I'd ever like had grief so bad that I actually knew it was grief. Like, oh, Daniel, you're not just depressed. Like this is grief. Like this is, something
You
more than
feel
that.
it.
Yeah. And so looking back, I think I would have probably handled grief a lot differently and stuff like that. But yeah, great question. Good question. Because,
Thank
but
God
go
they didn't
ahead.
want me. Thank God nobody nominated me to pastor a church. Not at that age, okay?
No, no. Well, and I'll
So,
tell you another thing too in that regard is that you learn very quickly, I guess, that everybody doesn't have it together. And so I guess maybe in a way, now that you're asking me this question, I'm processing here out loud in real time. Maybe in a way it was therapeutic for me because I got to see other families having the same struggles that my family had had, and I got to see people having the same struggles that I had had, and I did not necessarily feel as terminally unique. So I guess in some way, and belonging, like I had a good group of ministers. I was well respected, and that was grief too when I left the church because I lost a lot of that. Of course, I'm back now, but a lot of broken relationships. And I think I was dishonest with myself about a lot of things because I didn't want to lose that community. I finally fit in. I never fit in high school. And in ministry, I finally fit in, and that felt good. I might be the 20-year-old among 40-year-olds, but I fit in. Like they accept me. And so I just kind of went along with, the culture because I just needed to be accepted. But now I don't need that, so I'm a lot more honest about things, which drives my
wow.
mom crazy. Love you, Mom. Which drives my mom crazy because I obviously disagree with the church about a lot of things, but I can be honest about it now. So yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I find, and that's one of the things that I find refreshing about listening to you too, man, is your humility. The fact that when I listen to you, I know that that you're just a person. You know what I mean? That you're human. That you make mistakes. I mean, we're not all we're perfectly flawed.
Hmm. Yeah.
And what you said about being where you fit in. And that's how I felt when I'd arrived at the meetings. When I pull up to the coffee pot and there's somebody over there that's leaning over against the wall crying because they just lost their child or their family due to, maybe DSS taking them or something like, I can, hug their neck and say, hey, look, you're in the right place. I've
Hmm.
been there before. I know
Yeah.
where you're at. Like,
Yeah.
and we had a guy last night, Daniel, and at the meeting, and like I said, this meeting sort of lax, and he had brought up, that he don't really need the meetings that he can do with or without them,
Hmm.
and that's fine. I mean, that's that, you know what I mean. That's okay. Like this is an open meeting. You're willing to say you can say whatever your truth is, okay? But and I find myself going to meetings more today, not necessarily to keep me clean, because my desire has been lifted. But the thing is, I need to show up so I'm not stealing my recovery. Okay, somebody gave their recovery to me, and it's my job to make sure that the doors are open, that I'm able to help someone else in need. We call that stealing recovery. When you go and you get better and then you just leave,
Hmm.
and I think last week, like you said, I'm willing to make that trip to the detox. If I got to do
Yeah.
it every day after work, I'm willing to do it.
Yeah.
You know, but
Yeah.
I don't know what. I'm just
Yeah.
man. I'm
Well, no,
grateful.
I think you were just preaching to me because God's been speaking to this to me in several ways. You're like the third or fourth person to kind of say this in so many words. Is like you can't. It's like Jesus said, judge not lest you be judged. Your Father in heaven's forgiven you many sins, therefore forgive others many sins. And so it's like this, like what you've been forgiven of, what you've recovered from, you should help others rather than judge them. Like you should help. You should bring them on board, as much as possible,
Yeah.
and help. And that's part of the process. But also, I think for me, what I was saying is that there are some topics that I'm going to be tackling in my future episodes that I have not tackled yet, and I have not tackled them for fear. of what others would think of me and for fear of how I might be judged. But the truth is, not to tackle them would be stealing something from people who need to hear it. And so I am going to make those episodes. So stay tuned. Pull out some popcorn.
I can't wait.
Yeah, right. But because
Sorry, Mom.
somebody the other day had just told me, somebody the other day had just told me, God had spoken to them in a very particular matter and was basically like, you can no longer act like you don't know this. You can no longer act like you don't believe this. And so I think, and you said earlier about honesty, which is also a big part of recovery, like living in honesty is so important, and it is very hard to do. It's like when you really practice it, and we're not talking about just not telling lies, right? It's deeper than that. It's deeper than that. Yeah, right. It's like Jim Carrey on Liar Liar, right? He's just telling the truth no matter is risky business, but calls you to a higher level of integrity, right? Because you have to be an honest person, so there's less wiggle room for you to kind of get away with stuff. So thank you for sharing that.
Man, that medallion you get when you pick up at the meetings, the one thing it says on it, man, is to thine own self be true. And that is so deep, and it is exactly what you said. It's not, it's not just not telling a lie.
Right.
It's being true to yourself. And you would be so, man, I'm sure whatever topic it is, Daniel, I'm sure that you are not unique. That there are other people that feel the same.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
That's true.
So you are not alone.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
Hey, I know it. I know it. I don't just think it, buddy. I know it. So
I want to ask you a minute to talk about step 9 with me, because this is an important step, I think, in all spiritual practices. And I'm going to read 9 and then ask you if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about what that looked like for you. Make direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And before you share, I just want to say this is in the 12-step program. This principle also appears in most holiness teaching. So I grew up Pentecostal holiness. Pentecostal holiness was rooted in Wesleyan holiness. And even today in most holiness churches, somewhere in their teachings, in their doctrine, is the doctrine of restitution, which is literally worded almost identical to this, to make amends wherever is possible as long as it doesn't do harm. So this is a very spiritual principle. But would you mind sharing what that looked like for you, or maybe a couple of experiences maybe you had in that regard?
Sure. When you first read it, I think about what my sponsor says all the time. He thought when he first read it that maybe it was written wrong, because it does not say whenever possible. It says wherever possible. And see, and that leads me to believe that God's going to put you in the right place at the right time. It's not so much a time as it is a place. And
I like that.
And I was at a place in my life, man, that I had to make amends for some of the damage I had done, and I was taught that amends, if you hit your neighbor's fence, you're not meant to go over there and say, "I'm sorry, I hit your fence," and drive off. They want you to go to Home Depot, buy the boards and repair that fence to make it right. To make amends is to make something right, or at least as much right as possible. I had the toughest amends I've had to make, Daniel, of course, was from that accident. The guy, his name was Daniel, but I had to make amends to his mother for, what I had done, the harm that I had caused. She had lost her son due to my negligence, and man, that was scary for me. And I talked to my sponsor about it first, and what he told me was, Darren, keep it short and keep it, just keep it short, and I reached out to her thinking that she was going to rip my head off even after all the time, and as soon as she realized who I was, I had sent her a message on Facebook, actually.
Okay.
And I realized she asked me what my full name was, and of course I told her, and she was like, and then I seen the little dot, 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 dot,
Yeah.
waiting, somebody's typing, and I'm like,
That's the
holding my,
anxiety bubble. That's the anxiety
yeah,
bubble.
man, I'm holding my chest. And the first thing she said was, "Oh my God, I've been worried sick about you. Are you
Oh,
okay?"
wow. Oh, wow.
Like, and and again, thinking about, man, I never, like, out of all the things I had envisioned, that was not going to be the thing, that she said to me. But I was able to make an amends with her, and like with that situation, we call what I'm doing today making a living amends.
Okay.
Okay, because I can never make that right, but what I can do is I can live a better life and help others to continue to try to keep people from making that same mistake. And and there's another one that comes to mind. Uh, there's a guy back home, and I'm not going to mention any names, Daniel, because it's not important. But
Sure.
there's a guy back home that everybody used to kind of pick on in school, and I was never a mean spirited person. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
I just wasn't. But remember when I said I like to fit in? So
Yeah.
of course I kind of played the background of certain situations, and I had ran into this guy where at the grocery store. See, this was like one of them wherever possible
Wherever places.
situations,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because
Okay.
I never
Hmm.
thought I would see this guy again. But I had already put
Right.
him on my list.
Yeah.
I had but probably picked on him at school and stuff like that. Not that I was anything special, but
Yeah.
uh, but I seen him there with his kid at the grocery store, man, and rather than going up to him and being like, man, I just want to tell you, I'm so sorry for, how I acted in high school. Because, that's the point to where, think about that now. Like, right there, just by making that statement, you could injure him even further, right? Because you're
Hmm.
bringing up something in the past that may have happened that he don't want to think about no more, right?
Right. Right.
So what I did was I walked up to him and I kind of I hugged his neck, told him it was good to see him, and I looked over at his kid and told his kid what a great father he had, how cool he was, and and I went about my way. I went about my way, man,
Yeah.
and to me that was sort of me making an amends.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like I didn't have to bring up anything that was going to injure him, or hell, my sponsor said he had a guy that used to pee on himself a lot, and he said he couldn't just walk up to him and say, "Hey, man, I'm sorry, I picked on you for peeing on yourself."
Right. Right.
Yeah, you know what I mean. But
Yeah.
and what better amends to make than him leaving with his child and his child thinking his daddy was a cool guy, man,
Yeah.
and like, I mean,
Yeah. That's wisdom. I love that. That's wisdom in doing it that would in a way that would not injure them or others. And I've seen this practiced by well-meaning church folk in a way that harmed, and
yeah,
I heard of this secondhand. Like I heard of a lady that had an affair with like a man like years earlier, and then comes back and tells him and his wife like all these years later, and basically like destroyed the whole family, with
oh,
this thing, just kind of drops it on them.
right,
So I
right,
think that's so
yeah.
important, is that there has to be wisdom in it, and I think the way you handled that is beautiful, like really, really beautiful. And how did the guy act? Did he say anything to you when you came over and hugged his neck? And
I think he was surprised, like,
okay, okay,
I mean, he knew who I was. I knew who he
yeah,
was,
yeah,
and it was just, and he smiled, you know what
uh-huh.
I mean? And,
Yeah,
and, and the fact that I could see him living his best life with his kid, man, like, that made me smile. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
for
Like,
sure.
and and the thing is, man, he may not even remember anything of that, but it don't matter. I remembered it, and when
Right.
I seen him, first thing I thought was that wherever possible, like, well, wherever was that food line,
Yes.
so and God has a way of putting us, maybe He needed that. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe God put help. Maybe I needed it. That's the
Right.
real deal,
Right. Yeah. That's
you
right.
know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And it's amazing what impact those years, middle school and high school, what impact they do
Wow.
have on us, like as adults. And
Absolutely.
I was bullied really bad in middle school. Like eighth grade was just terrible. High school wasn't so bad, but middle school was rough for me. And one of the guys who bullied me, years later, we connected on Facebook, and it was kind of weird because he just was really friendly to me and acted like nothing had happened. This was a case where I just asked him. I was like, "Do you remember what you used to do to me?" And he didn't remember. Like, he honestly did not remember
Wow.
it. And I was like, "I remember these distinct moments of you punching me in my chest. Like, I remember all these things." And he told me, he said, "Man," he said, "my life in middle school was so jacked up. Like, I was just trying to survive. I was like, my home life, things were going on at home. Like, he apparently was having it really rough. And so he was just acting out in school. And I was probably just one of his victims. I felt like I was the only one, but I was probably
Right.
just
Right.
like one of them, Like, maybe I must have been not as important because he barely, like, he never did remember doing any of it. And I believe him. I don't think he was, like, lying. I think
Right.
and he died. He died young, of cancer.
Man.
But anyway, and these are all people we probably both know. But yeah, that was an interesting experience. But doing that, I mean, that's really amazing. And I think it's so important, like restitution, making things right, making amends, is like a really, really important
Yeah.
thing.
Financial amends are tough. I was taught not, when I first got clean, I knew I owed people money. And
Okay.
and so I'd reach out and be like, hey, man, I just want to let you know, I know I owe you, but, I'll get it to you. So, man,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I called my sponsor. He'd go, why did you do that? He's like, you didn't call me. You didn't say nothing. He said, don't try to make financial amends with no money. What is wrong with you?
Right. Got it.
So,
Wisdom.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, I'm learning.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very cool. So you said earlier you didn't really have the desire anymore, and I was just going to ask you, like, what is that like for you today? How do you handle moments of temptation and doubt today?
Lord, that's a good question. As far as temptation, I'll be honest, man. Like I feel like God has removed the thought of actually using a drug in my mind scares me to death. It
Mm,
was kind of like back when I first done something, I was like, this might kill me. Like I truly feel like that now, and
mm,
that's no joke these days. I mean, it will kill you today,
mm.
but but
Yeah, for sure.
the temptation to use isn't so much there. Like as far as maybe like drinking. Like I don't. I tell you the thing that keeps me from drinking because every now and then, like my fiance, she'll have a glass of wine or maybe like a mixed drink or something like that. And of course, I can't be like, oh, there's not going to be none of that in our house. Like,
Right. Sure.
because I have to be an adult and realize everybody don't have the same problems I got.
Right.
Like, you know, I don't hear you need to go to an AA meeting like you had a mixed drink. Like, no,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
but, the way it keeps me centered though, number one, I surround myself with people who know who I am and what I am.
Mm,
Okay. And the people that I surround myself today are people that love me and have my best interest at heart.
mm.
Like I can almost guarantee you, we're not going to try to prove it, but I could just about guarantee you if I picked this up and it had alcohol in it, she'd climb out that window right there and slap it out of my hand. Okay.
Right.
Cause
Right.
she loves me like that. Okay.
Right. Yes.
But the main thing is, honestly, man, I can't be of service to nobody if I pick that glass of alcohol up and drink it.
Mm,
And that's having purpose, man.
yeah.
That's what keeps me centered from temptation.
Mm,
Temptation,
hmm.
having a purpose.
Meaning is so important. You got to have purpose and you got to have meaning in life.
Yeah,
And when you don't have that, like you were talking about earlier, it's that that slow killing of yourself, that slow suicide. And a lot of times that's what substance use is. It's a slow self-destruction.
Yeah, it's like a small, and I think in rehab they had said it was like a snowball rolling down a hill, and it just
Mm,
keeps getting bigger and bigger. You
yeah,
know, I didn't start off like doing hard drugs. I mean, most
right,
people don't. You know what
right,
I mean?
right. Exactly. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And you are right. Today they will kill you, and it's a totally
Yeah,
different world out there now, and it's really something. So I'm going to ask you one final question, and we'll wrap up our conversation today. But thank you so much for coming on. I've really enjoyed chatting with you, and it was really great, and I've enjoyed all of our discussion today.
me too, man. Me too.
So, what advice you said this before? Your full time job is helping people recover. You
Yes.
have a job, you own a business, but your calling, if you will, is to help others. So, what advice would you give to someone who's struggling with substance use and who is hesitant to explore recovery?
Um, the hardest thing I believe for people to get better is that first step, and that's and it's the first step, man. Admitting that they have a problem, that they're powerless, like finding the bottom. Actually, like I talked to a guy today, well, last night and today actually, that just is ready to surrender, man. Just surrender. They show in the movies. They show like you ever see like somebody surrendering to like military or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. They don't just grab the gun and just throw it on the ground and say I'm done.
Right.
Like they cautiously, they set it down and they kind of back up and they
Yeah.
hold their hands up. They give up. You know, and just be
Mm-hmm.
willing to try something different. They say that insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. Man, I can't tell you how many years of my life I wasted in pure insanity.
Mm-hmm.
Like every day was going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
And when I told my mother and the people I loved that I'm done, I'm finished this time, I
Mm-hmm.
meant it. I
Mm-hmm.
meant it every time. My mama
Yeah.
used to say, "You're such a good liar." No, I'm not. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
lying.
Right.
I meant it.
Yeah.
But uh, my biggest advice is just surrender. Let somebody help you that knows the way. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
That is so good.
and God forbid, reach out to me. I will point you in the right direction. You know what I mean? Like I can't help everybody, but I sure can point. I know people that can. Okay,
That's good.
I surround myself with people, you know,
Yeah.
that I know are willing to help.
Yeah.
So
Maybe we can get your email address at the end of this episode, and I'll put it in the description of this episode because
yes,
ultimately, I would love for this episode to find the people who need to hear it, and that's why I wanted to do this. It's something that's close to my heart, my family. We have lots of on my wife's side of the family, on my side of the family, so many people affected by alcoholism and substance use disorder. This is something very near to my heart, and I've seen it in church. I've seen it what it does to families and what it does to individuals. And I think that surrendering is so important. And you said something there I hope everyone caught. Surrendering doesn't necessarily happen all at once. But if you're willing to put it down for a minute and step away again and step away again, and this was your story, right? Whenever he said,
yeah,
"Are you going to push this highlighter across the floor?" Well, you weren't quite there yet. You just wanted out of jail. But at some point, that surrender became a full surrender
yes,
and you have to be willing to at least take those first steps. And so, if you need help, I'll definitely leave Daren's information in there. Also has some connections in the local Charlotte and Gaston area. If anyone's listening to this, you can also reach out to me if you're anywhere, and I will definitely try to find someone to connect you with so that you can get the help that you need. But Daren, thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us before you leave, or
The only thing, to align with that, they have the meeting guide app. It's a picture of it's like a white fold out chair on the app.
okay,
If you're in need for a meeting, that will direct you to the closest meeting near you using GPS. It's super simple.
excellent. And that's available, I'm assuming, on Android and iPhone?
Absolutely.
Okay, and what
The
is the name of
meeting guide.
Meeting Guide, the Meeting Guide, and I'll find an icon of that and throw it up on the screen when I put out the final edit. Yep. Well, thank you so much, Daren. I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a real honor. I've enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, I love it.
All
Tell
right,
your
man.
mom I said hey.
All right,
Or
she's
I'll
listening.
tell her. Hey,
She's
Mom.
listening.
So
All right.
cool, man.
All right, my
Thank
friend.
you, Daniel.
You bet.
I love you, man.
I love you too, man. Have a good evening.
You too. Bye.